Almost as soon as Henry VIII laid eyes on the portrait of the distant and mysterious Anne of Cleves, he decided she would become his next queen. But the moment they finally stood face to face, his heart dropped. She was, according to him, shockingly unattractive. Or at least, that's the excuse he gave. Today, Anne is remembered as Henry's unwanted wife. Yet modern historians believe his disgust came from something far stranger and far darker. Anne of Cleves belonged to a tough, unyielding lineage. Her father, John, Duke of Cleves, was one of the loudest rebels of the Protestant Reformation, constantly irritating the Pope and Catholic rulers across Europe. Naturally, he raised Anne and her siblings to be independent thinkers who didn't bow easily. Henry VIII, who had turned his back on Catholicism after divorcing Catherine of Aragon, immediately took notice when Anne reached marrying age. But Henry didn't get the reaction he expected. Anne was deeply attached to her mother, and their female-led household was a peaceful world she didn't want to leave. In fact, when Henry first attempted to court Anne, her mother subtly tried to block the match. We all know Henry VIII was a notorious flirt, but few truly understand how uncomfortable the situation was for Anne. She was 24, quite mature for a royal bride, but Henry was nearly twice her age. And to make things worse, he didn't only consider Anne, he openly weighed her younger sister, Amalia, as a candidate for wife number 4. If he had chosen Amalia instead, the disastrous fourth marriage might never have happened. In the late 1330s, Henry sent his court artist Hans Holbein on a rather unsettling assignment. Still unsure which sister he preferred, Henry ordered him to paint both young women, but with a very specific warning. Paint them truthfully. No flattering tricks. The king needed a queen who was genuinely beautiful. Holbein faced a major obstacle when he arrived. Both Anne and Amalia followed strict German customs that required them to keep their faces veiled. The artist had to slowly earn their trust before the sisters finally lowered their coverings and allowed him to sketch their features. When Holbein returned, Henry immediately chose Anne. But, contrary to romantic legend, his decision probably had little to do with beauty. As the elder daughter, Anne carried greater political value, and Henry's alliance with her family mattered more than her looks. The idea that Holbein tricked the king by painting Anne as prettier than she was doesn't match Henry's own instructions. Still, as anyone in online dating knows, a portrait can't reveal everything, especially chemistry. And when Anne entered the room for the first time, Henry was visibly disappointed. He complained instantly, blaming Holbein for enhancing her and accusing his advisor, Thomas Cromwell, of exaggerating her appearance. Henry's infamous words after meeting Anne were harsh. She is nothing as she has been described. Despite Henry's protests, the wedding machinery was already in motion. There was no graceful way out. Once they married, the dreaded wedding night followed, and it was a disaster. The next morning, Henry coldly remarked, "I liked her before, not much, but now I like her less." His complaints weren't limited to attraction. Henry even accused Anne of unpleasant smells at the worst possible moments, a claim historians heavily doubt, but one Henry used strategically. Desperate to escape the marriage, Henry and his advisors revived an old childhood engagement Anne once had at age 11 with Francis of Lorraine. They tried to use this pre-contract as evidence that Anne was never free to marry Henry in the first place. A full court trial was arranged, a bizarre spectacle. Henry wanted the annulment to state that the marriage was never consummated, but he also didn't want anyone thinking he was impotent. So he hired a doctor to testify that the king had experienced nocturnal emissions while sleeping beside Anne, TMI on a royal level. In the end, Henry won. Their marriage was annulled on July 9, 1440, after just 6 months, the shortest of Henry's unions. Anne was likely relieved to leave the marriage with her head still attached, unlike some of Henry's other wives. But this was only the beginning of their complicated relationship. Even before the annulment, Henry had already moved on. He quickly fixated on the young Catherine Howard and married her only weeks after casting Anne aside. Publicly, Anne showed no bitterness. She even gifted Henry and Catherine 2 elegant horses for New Year's Day, 1441, and joined them for celebrations. But controversy soon dragged Anne back into the spotlight. A scandalous rumor spread through the court, claiming Anne had secretly given birth, and some even whispered the child belonged to Henry. Though almost certainly false, Henry took the rumors seriously enough to interrogate people who insisted Anne was still the rightful queen. In 1442, Anne found herself in trouble again. Henry discovered Catherine Howard's alleged infidelity and prepared to execute her. In his distress, Henry lashed out at Anne, demanding she return a royal ring that Catherine had gifted her, a petty, cruel power move. When Catherine Howard was executed, Anne quietly saw an opportunity. Many historians believe Anne hoped Henry might reconsider her as a potential wife again. But Henry instead married Catherine Parr. Anne had a decent education for a European noblewoman and quickly picked up English, but her upbringing lacked the arts, music, dancing, and singing, passions Henry adored. Even when they could speak the same language, their worlds were far apart. Still, Anne was clever enough to win the affection of Henry's children. She bonded with Edward VI, Mary I, and even Elizabeth I, who later inherited some of Anne's jewelry. Her alliances with the royal children ensured her safety and comfort after Henry's death. She likely attended Mary's coronation at Westminster Abbey, evidence of their close relationship. Henry, surprisingly, treated Anne generously after the annulment. He granted her multiple estates, a healthy income, and honored her as the highest-ranking woman in England after the Queen and princesses. He even referred to her as his beloved sister. It didn't erase the humiliation she endured, but it ensured she lived comfortably. Anne's appearance has long been debated. Descriptions suggest she was tall, fair-haired, dignified, but with a serious expression that made her seem older than she was, certainly not hideous as Henry claimed. Anne lived longer than all of Henry's other wives, and longer than Henry himself. She died on July 16, 1557, around age 41, likely from cancer. Her family honored her memory by burying her in Westminster Abbey, the only one of Henry's wives to rest there. Despite the annulment, her tomb proudly states, "Anne of Cleves, Queen of England." But one final twist remains. Historians believe Henry disliked Anne not because of her looks, but because of their very first meeting. On New Year's Day, 1440, Anne's entourage stopped at Rochester. While she watched a bull baiting event from a window, a large man in disguise barged into the room, It was Henry himself. He expected Anne to recognize him instantly, the kind of fairy tale moment he believed in. But Anne reacted like any normal woman confronted by a strange man. She ignored him, or, according to some versions, she panicked when he tried to touch or kiss her. Henry left humiliated. And some historians argue that from that moment forward, Henry decided he would never like Anne, no matter what she looked like. And the rest, as they say, became one of history's most tragic royal misunderstandings. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more historical stories.